Welcome, today's story is full of drama. Like and subscribe to stay updated. Let's get started.
I'm Ethan Grayson Parker, though anyone who knows me for more than a day calls me Ethan. I'm an only child raised by my mom after my dad's tragic death in an industrial accident caused by a failed safety device. The company responsible and the safety device manufacturer both paid significant settlements, particularly after a trial revealed the manufacturer knowingly sold a faulty product. My mom, careful and forward-thinking, set up a trust fund for me with most of the money, allowing me to access it only when I turned 35. However, she made one misstep. She didn't allow for any withdrawals before then, even for education expenses. By the time I was 38, my life began unraveling in ways I couldn't have imagined, and the troubles dragged on for what felt like forever. Growing up, I was always a little different from my peers. I was sick for much of my first 3 years, which left me rail-thin and often unable to join in typical childhood activities. Stuck indoors during those times, I developed an early love of reading and could read fluently by the age of 4, not just kids' books either. I tackled newspapers and devoured books from the library weekly. Though I wasn't drawn to organized contact sports like soccer, I didn't shy away from physical play entirely. On the rare occasions we could gather 5 or 6 kids and find a decent patch of grass, I happily joined in schoolyard no-pads tackle football. Those moments were a brief escape from a childhood that often felt a little out of step with everyone else. Natalie Hayes, who would eventually become my wife, entered my life in 7th grade. We had been married for 9 years when the storms began brewing. I was a decent sandlot baseball pitcher and could play most infield positions, though third base was out of the question since I'm left-handed. When it came to organized baseball, however, most coaches would take one look at me and decide I wasn't cut out for the team. Basketball was even worse. I dribbled better with a glass in my hand than with a ball. My jump shots were bricks, and my free throws were so awkward that the coach laughed me off the court. Running, on the other hand, became my strong suit. I joined the high school cross-country team and found my place there. While I wasn't the fastest runner, I consistently placed in the top 15 at our regional meets and made varsity as a freshman. Another thing that set me apart was my love for dance. My parents enrolled me in dance classes when I was 8, and I continued until my junior year of high school. These weren't your typical classes. I learned ballroom, folk, and jazz dance. Because of this, I developed excellent body control and a deep appreciation for music. That body control would come to my rescue several times later in life, while my dance skills ensured I was never without a partner at school dances, even when I went solo. After I stopped attending dance classes, I took up martial arts. I trained under an instructor who specialized in Krav Maga and other offensive disciplines, including bow staff, baton, and knife techniques. He emphasized that these skills were strictly for last resort situations, but the training instilled confidence and discipline that stayed with me. Another reason I always found myself on the fringes of leagues was my comfort around girls from an early age. While other boys were talking about girl cooties in 3rd grade, I never bought into the idea. I enjoyed their company, and they seemed to accept me easily, which made me feel at ease around them. I first met Natalie during the summer before 7th grade. Her family had moved into a house down the street, and though I didn't yet have a full grasp of terms like pretty, cute, or beautiful, I knew she was pleasant to look at and had a quiet charm about her. One late summer afternoon, I was playing street baseball with the neighborhood kids. We used a battered tennis ball to avoid breaking windows, and, as usual, the teams were uneven. For some reason, I always ended up on the shorthanded team. That day, there were 7 of us, including 2 girls, both on my team. I noticed Natalie sitting on her porch watching us play. Seizing the opportunity, I asked if she wanted to join in to even out the teams. She ran inside to ask her mom, then came back out, glove in hand, and introduced herself to everyone. From the moment she stepped onto the makeshift field, it was clear she was a natural. Natalie could hit, field, and run like a seasoned player. We spent the rest of the summer getting to know each other, thanks largely to my mom. She was our neighborhood's unofficial welcome wagon, and when she met Natalie's mother, she volunteered me to be Natalie's summer entertainment committee and her escort to school in the fall. Surprisingly, I didn't mind at all. That summer, Natalie and I played games, went on walks, talked for hours, and swam at the community pool just 5 blocks away. Our neighborhood was full of parks, 3 within half a mile, and plenty of open spaces where we could play. It felt like there was always something for us to do together. When school started, I walked with Natalie every day during 7th grade. When we moved on to middle school, I stood with her at the bus stop each morning. Over time, we became best friends. By the time we were sophomores, Natalie, like many girls, had matured faster than I had. One day, she told me a junior, Jason Mitchell, had asked her out. His reputation was well known, and I tried to warn Natalie about him. To my surprise, she dismissed my concerns and accused me of being jealous. I realized I was jealous but stood my ground, and it led to our first real argument. Afterward, I avoided Natalie for the entire week before her date and for a couple of days afterward. I only approached her again when I heard that Jason was sporting a black eye and a broken finger. When I finally got close to Natalie, she had her head down. The moment I said her name, she rushed to me, grabbed me in a hug, and started crying into my shirt. When I gently lifted her face to look at me, I saw the handprint on her cheek. A deep, angry bruise from a hard slap. Her whole cheek was swollen. Once she calmed down, she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Ethan, I'm so sorry for doubting you." Jason was like an octopus, and I had to grab his hand and bend a finger back until I think I broke it. Then he slapped me really hard, so I punched him. He pushed me out of his car and told me to walk home. "You'll never get a date when the school finds out you're a tease," he said. She sobbed and continued, "I called Mom, and she and Dad came to pick me up. They were furious. They drove straight to Jason's house, marched me up to the door, and showed my face to his parents. His mom and dad called him on his cell and told him to get home immediately. We left before he got back, so I don't know what punishment he got, but there aren't any rumors spreading. And now his hand is in a cast." I walked her to her next class, and as we approached, Jason was there waiting. His smirk was as venomous as his words. "Well, looks like I wasn't the only one who got a trophy from our date. You and your parents got me punished by my dad. I'm grounded until New Year's because of you. But don't think this is over. I'll get my revenge. You'd better watch your back." Natalie took a step toward him, anger flashing in her eyes, but I quickly pushed her behind me. Jason instinctively stepped back when she moved forward, and I couldn't help but smile at him. A slow, deliberate smile that carried no warmth, only warning. I said loudly to the growing crowd, "Wow, Jason, you must be a real big man. Beating up your date because she told you no. Takes a lot of bravery for someone like you to lay hands on a girl who just wanted you to keep yours to yourself." Jason's face twisted with anger, and he swung at me. I easily stepped aside, avoiding his fist. "Yep," I continued louder this time. "A real brave guy who couldn't even win the fight against her. She's got a bruise on her face, and you've got a cast on your hand and a black eye." That's when the laughter started. The crowd had apparently heard Jason's version of events, and it didn't involve him losing to a girl. The truth was too much for them, and the laughter grew. Jason's face turned red, and his temper boiled over. He swung at me again, but this time, a teacher grabbed his arm and hauled him off to the office. That was the end of that episode. The fallout, however, was fascinating. Natalie was approached by several girls who had dated Jason, all of them eager to share their own stories. As for Jason, he never got another date for the rest of his time at our school. His family moved away after the school year ended, and I never saw him again. After the confrontation in the hallway, I came out as a minor hero to some of the girls. The story circulated that I had protected Natalie and kept Jason at bay. This led to Natalie and me being invited to a few girl-planned activities where boys were included, and we both made new friends. From that point on, Natalie was my shadow until we graduated. We went on dates nearly every weekend, and she wore my Letterman jacket more than I did. On prom night during our junior year, she gave me her virginity, and from then on we made love whenever we had the chance. We both knew our paths would diverge after graduation. I was a scholar athlete with opportunities to pursue, while Natalie planned to attend a local business school. During my senior year, I was being recruited by several small and Division II colleges to join their track teams. Unfortunately, during the second-to-last regular cross-country meet, I was jostled into a clump of trees and suffered a broken leg, collarbone, and 2 ribs, one of which punctured my lung. The injuries ended any chance of an athletic scholarship. While I received other scholarship offers, they didn't cover enough to make college feasible. This was when we discovered the flaw in the trust. My mom's trust income was structured to only cover her expenses, but the trust assets disqualified me from financial aid. I also refused to take on an unreasonable amount of debt to complete a degree. My other option was the military. I enlisted to begin basic training in August after graduation, while Natalie had been accepted to a local business school. After completing basic training, I returned home for a 10-day delay en route. I arrived on a Wednesday around midday, and after a few hours at home, I called Natalie's house to speak with her. Her mother answered and informed me that Natalie was out on a date and wouldn't be back until late. A mix of jealousy, frustration, and hurt washed over me. I had written to Natalie every day during training and had spoken to her just a week earlier, letting her know exactly when I'd be home. She never mentioned she was seeing someone else. "Thank you, Mrs. Hayes," I said, doing my best to keep my voice steady. "Please let Natalie know I called, but let her know there's no need for her to contact me anymore. She knew when I was coming home and had promised to be here. I'm sorry for bothering you." "Ethan, I'm so sorry," she replied, her tone regretful. "I thought she had told you. She's been dating this boy for a couple of weeks now. What would you like me to do?" "I'm not sure she lied. She just didn't mention she was dating when we talked this week. Could you please find my Letterman jacket and give it to my mom? If Natalie is seeing someone, she should have returned it. I appreciate your help." I ended up getting an earful from Natalie when her mother relayed the message. It was well past midnight when the loud pounding on Mom's front door woke me up. I had fallen asleep on the couch, so I was the first one to answer it. There stood an upset, tearful Natalie holding my jacket. When she saw it was me, she threw it at me and yelled, "I'm sorry. I forgot." She took a deep breath and screamed again. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you I was dating, but I am. And because of you, I've had to deal with a lot of crap from my parents. Ethan, I never want to see you again." Before I could say anything, she turned and ran off toward home. That was the last time I saw or heard from Natalie for nearly 6 years. There were no letters, no phone calls, and my mother never brought her up in conversations or letters. I thought I had moved on. Military training and exercises helped me bulk up. I wasn't a bodybuilder, but I reached 200 pounds on my 63 frame. The added weight finally made me look less like a scarecrow. My prior martial arts training helped me excel in the physical aspects of military life. I was often used as a crash test dummy and assistant instructor for hand-to-hand combat training. I was assigned to an infantry battalion as a weapons specialist, carrying a minigun and a backpack with an assistant carrying the ammunition belts. I completed a successful tour in Iraq without any wounds or injuries. After that tour, I came home for a 15-day delay en route. Natalie was nowhere to be found, and I didn't look too hard for her. Her last words still stung. I went back to my unit and was sent for more training. When I returned to my unit, we were deployed again to Iraq. I only had about 18 months left in my 4-year commitment, but I expected to be stop-lost, as many of the weapons specialists were either dead, medically out, or didn't stay in when they got the chance to get out. It was a dirty, bloody job. During the final year of my enlistment, I was still stationed in southern Iraq. One day, we were walking through a small village on a routine patrol when disaster struck. Insurgents, who clearly didn't know what they were doing, accidentally triggered an IED. The blast was deafening, and I was thrown to the ground as the force of the explosion knocked down the walls of the compound I had been standing in front of. The shockwave buried me up to my chest in debris. I was disoriented, struggling to breathe with the dust and rubble in my face, but I could hear the chaos unfolding around me. My assistant, who was with me, wasn't injured, but he immediately started calling out for help. The surrounding area was filled with the sounds of screams, and the carnage was immediate. Over 15 civilians were caught in the blast, some fatally wounded. The insurgents who set off the explosion were effectively wiped out in the blast, but for the rest of us, the fight for survival began. I could feel my body aching as I tried to free myself. My legs were pinned under tons of concrete and metal, but I managed to pull my left leg free only to discover that I had lost my foot just above the ankle. I couldn't move my right leg at all. I managed to stay conscious long enough to hear the team calling for medevac and to know help was on the way. The pain was intense and my right arm was broken, but the real concern was my right leg. The damage was severe. For surgeries would be required to repair the extensive fractures, and the doctors had to use nearly half a year's supply of stainless steel to reconstruct it. I spent my recovery time at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland, where my mother visited me several times. It was costly for her to make the trip, and while she got some help from veterans organizations, it was still a financial strain. While I was in rehab, I kept up with my studies at Georgetown University online. I managed to finish nearly all the courses for my business degree, leaving just one class to complete. I was determined to walk across that stage and receive my diploma when the time came. During one of my mother's visits, she finally caught me up on what had been happening with Natalie. After our argument, Natalie stopped dating and focused on her life. She graduated, got a job as an administrative assistant for a local tech firm, and seemed content with her career. My mom told me Natalie had apologized many times for how she had hurt me, though she never came to visit me or reached out by letter. Since I was stuck in bed waiting for my new foot, I decided to write to Natalie. Natalie, I am writing to let you know that I am no longer angry at you. I was hurt that you did not care enough to tell me you would not be around to see me when I was home. We had talked about not being exclusive after graduation, so your starting to date was not wrong. What I was angry about was your failure to inform me of that fact. As I said, I am no longer angry. You can date anyone or everyone you choose to. You don't have to feel guilty anymore. I know I never said it, but I was hoping that after we were both finished with our educations, we would be together again. I'm sorry you do not feel that way too. As I am now damaged goods, I will no longer harbor those dreams of us together. Have a good life, Natalie Hayes, and find a good man. Ethan. I sent the letter after I was told I would be discharged with a medical retirement disability rating of 80%. I was very surprised when I received a letter back from Natalie the next week and several weeks before my discharge date. Ethan, I wasn't sure if you wanted to hear from me. I read your letter and I realized that your dreams and mine were, and still are, that we would be together forever. I was angry that night because you made me feel guilty. I had forgotten that you were going to be home that Friday, and I was dating Christopher Allen. He wanted to take me to dinner and to dance that night, and in my excitement I just forgot. I have retrieved your jacket from your mother, and I wear it any time I am not at work and when I am thinking of you. I know your mother told you I am not dating. I am waiting for you. As far as damaged goods, I am more damaged than you will ever be. I let down my best friend, my true love, and myself by not telling you everything. Please, when you get back home, let's go someplace and talk. Just the two of us. I had a good, no, the best man, and I blew it with my love. Natalie, after reading that letter, my spirits were lifted. I did not totally realize how much I was hurt by her actions. The letter told me that I wasn't the only one who felt it. I decided to write back and hoped the communication could resume. Natalie, my dear, I hope that we can get back together. I only remember 2 times we have had problems. We had a long time together, and those 2 were relatively minor. They hurt, but they were minor. Your letter gives me an encouraging sign that we can overcome the difficulties that put us in the position we are now in. When you told me that you never wanted to see me again, I thought we were through. I now understand it was anger and embarrassment. That statement you made is why, until Mom told me you weren't dating, I did not try to contact you. If you would give me your email address or phone number, I will open a continuous line of communication. It will get so bad you will have to tell me to shut up. I miss my best friend, and I never told you, but I loved and still love you. Ethan. The next week, I got a short letter back. Ethan, my love, I would rather read or listen to us communicating too much than endure another day of the silence from the past 6 years. I promise that if you ever get a motor mouth, I will use the solution I used before. I remember that I used to kiss you to stop you from talking. I'm warning you, I will punish you that way again if you start running off at the mouth. Now, to get serious, I realized the night I blew off your return that I hurt myself as much or more than I hurt you. I told Christopher the next day that we would not be going out anymore. I knew I loved and lost you, so it wasn't fair to him or me to continue when there wasn't a chance for something stronger than just dates. I love you. I need you. Get well and come home to me. Love, Natalie. We continued to stay in touch through emails and the occasional phone call, as it was the quickest and most efficient way to communicate. I kept her updated on my rehab progress and schoolwork, and I let her know my discharge date. When the reunion finally happened, it completely caught me off guard. I was commuting to Silver Spring, Maryland, for my final class. After finishing it, I planned to head straight to my graduation ceremony. I had been given 6 tickets for the event, so I sent them to my mom, asking her to come and invite anyone she wanted. What I didn't expect was who would actually show up, or that the college had a special surprise planned for me. I didn't see Mom before the rest of the graduates were marched onto the football field and were told to sit. Because I was still on crutches, I was allowed to skip the march and came in after everyone else was seated. That way, I was assured an aisle seat. Student names were called in the order of class standing, and because I had been very motivated, I was one of the first 10. I was also an exception because of the crutches. I was called first. Before my name was mentioned, my military story was told. I slowly made my way up, and as I got on stage, my mother, Natalie's mother, and Natalie walked up the opposite stairs. I got my degree from Natalie. With tears in my eyes, I hugged my mother and got a scorching kiss and a rib-breaking hug from Natalie. The reunion continued. Natalie decided to come and visit at the hospital. She watched as I was fitted for my prosthetic foot. I was amazed that it didn't gross her out. I had my new plastic foot and the preliminary rehab, so the doctors decided that I could be treated as an outpatient. I walked with a cane as part of my rehab. I looked for an instructor to help me restart my martial arts training. Natalie took a leave of absence from her job, and the university allowed us to have a married student's apartment when I enrolled in their MBA program. I had all the needed credits and only had to complete a couple of lecture series and write a comprehensive paper to receive the degree. We lived together, and I asked her to marry me 3 times over the next 8 months. Each time she said, "Not yet." She told me jokingly that I needed to finish school first. The day my academic advisor told me my paper was accepted and my degree would be awarded, she finally said yes. Her mother, my mom, and Natalie went into superplanner mode. One thing my mother mentioned and Natalie insisted on was a prenuptial agreement. She told me that she wanted no doubts that she wasn't after my money. The prenup took the trust out of our shared assets. She also had it written that any real property, other than a second or additional homes, was to be the property of the trust. We were married on a warm and sunny June day. I had turned 29 earlier, and Natalie turned 29 on our honeymoon. I used some of my saved military pay to let us go to Hawaii for 2 weeks. We returned to our hometown, and I was offered a job with a local financial planning company. I was hired as a researcher and prospectus writer to recommend investment strategies. I became very good at it. Married life was good, but we had a frustrating time as we tried to get Natalie pregnant. After 2 years of serious trying, we decided to wait and let nature take its course. I progressed with my company, and Natalie went back to school and got her bachelor's degree in secondary education. When she received the degree, she was hired by the same high school we had attended. When my trust became accessible, we purchased a large piece of property with a beautiful 4-bedroom house just outside of town. The trust was listed as the owner, and because of that, all the normal things like taxes and insurance were paid from it. Natalie was very happy as a math teacher for 8th graders and made a lot of friends among the school staff. My office had several colleagues who became good friends as well. They all loved Natalie. Because we had the space, we often entertained groups at our home. Almost all of her coworkers became friends, except for Christopher Allen. Like a bad penny, he returned. He was a relative of the school principal and worked as a paid teacher's aide. He made it widely known that he regretted not having married Natalie, which would cause problems later. It was at Natalie's 34th birthday party when things started to get weird in our marriage. The party was to celebrate her birthday and the announcement of her pregnancy. We had invited the school staff, teachers, and my office staff to our home for the party. I hired a highly rated caterer and had an open, but limited, bar to ensure no one drove home drunk. I had never developed a taste for alcohol, so I didn't drink. I had lost sight of Natalie for a while during the party, but then a couple of her coworkers asked if I knew where she might be. Concerned, I started searching for her. I eventually found her in a hallway near the bedrooms, cornered by Christopher, who was trying to pull her into one of the rooms. In a split-second decision, I grabbed a large wooden pepper mill, one of those heavy ones used to crush fresh peppercorns, from a nearby table. Christopher didn't seem to hear me coming down the hall. I swung the mill at his head to get his attention, and I must have hit him harder than I intended because he collapsed instantly. When I turned to check on Natalie, I saw her blouse and bra were torn, and she had visible scratches on her chest. She immediately threw herself at me, sobbing uncontrollably. I held her for a moment, trying to comfort her, but when she let go, I instinctively grabbed my phone and took some pictures of her injuries before she realized what was happening. I knew the authorities needed to be involved, so I made the decision to call the police. Just as the sheriff's deputies arrived and entered the house, Christopher started to regain consciousness. He got to his feet and, seeing my distraction with the police, grabbed the pepper mill and hit me in the head. The blow was enough to knock me down, though I wasn't out completely. I managed to see the deputies deploy tasers, hitting Christopher squarely. The next thing I remember, I passed out. I woke up in a hospital room, disoriented, with Natalie, my mom, and Natalie's mom all there. turned out that, in addition to a severe concussion, I had a hairline skull fracture, and my prosthetic foot had been damaged during the scuffle. When Natalie saw me stir, her face filled with relief, and she rushed over to give me a hug. "You did it again," she said. "You're always either making me happy or saving me. I just wish Christopher hadn't hit you so hard. Are you feeling okay, darling?" I winced as a sharp pain pulsed in my head and took a moment to gather my thoughts. I have a really bad headache, and I seem to be missing a functional foot, but other than that, I could eat the south end of a northbound horse. Natalie kissed me and laughed. "Well, the knock on the head didn't improve your taste in humor. It's still awful. I'll call the nurse and see if we can't get you some real, wonderful hospital food. Oh, and your foot is on the platform under your bed, along with the remains of your clothes that the ER crew cut off of you." Then she leaned over, kissed me again, and whispered, "I love you, my hero." I was released from the hospital after 2 days, and other than a slowly diminishing headache, I was fine. Christopher, however, was not done interfering in our lives. He was released on bail and was spotted driving past our house several times in the following weeks. The police warned him off, but he ignored them. When Christopher's trial came around, he pled guilty as part of a deal with the district attorney's office. He admitted to 2 counts of felony assault and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. However, the sentence was suspended, and he was given 10 years of probation instead. As part of the probation, a restraining order was placed against him, requiring him to stay at least 300 yards away from Natalie and me. The order also covered our home, workplaces, and any place we might be at any given time. If we entered a location, he was required to leave immediately. While we were relieved that he was held accountable and that the restraining order was in place, we were disappointed that it wasn't permanent. We had hoped for a more lasting measure, but we knew it was a step in the right direction. Christopher, however, hadn't fully considered the consequences of the restraining order and its strict distance requirements. He was forced to quit his job because it was too close to Natalie's workplace, and he had to change churches as well. These disruptions seemed to anger him, and his frustration boiled over. After about the 3rd time he was caught vandalizing Natalie's car at her work, it became clear he wasn't willing to let go of his resentment so easily. The authorities caught up with him once again, and he faced further consequences for his actions. Christopher was soon back in jail after violating the terms of his probation. The same judge who had approved his original sentence revoked it, and he was sentenced to the full 4 years in prison, minus the few days he had served before making bail. I thought that finally, the drama in our lives was over, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Things seemed to be looking up when Natalie shared the happy news of her pregnancy. She was glowing with excitement and anticipation. But just when we thought we could start to relax, another disaster struck. One afternoon, as Natalie was walking down the hallway of the middle school where she worked, the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day. Over 300 teenagers flooded the hallways, all rushing to get to their next destination. In the chaos, one of the students accidentally knocked Natalie down, and in the ensuing crush of students, another one fell on top of her. The impact caused Natalie to break her wrist. As she was rushed to the hospital, doctors confirmed the heartbreaking news. She had miscarried. The fetus, at 18 weeks, was no longer viable, and the pregnancy ended in tragedy. It was a devastating blow, not just physically but emotionally, as we had already started to dream about our growing family. It felt like just as we were beginning to heal, another cruel twist of fate struck. Natalie was devastated by the loss, and it quickly spiraled into a deep depression. No matter how much I tried to comfort her, nothing seemed to help. It was as if all my words and efforts only pushed her further away. The tension between us reached a breaking point when, in the midst of my attempts to be there for her, she screamed at me in frustration. "I don't need help," she shouted. "I need you to get away from me. You disgust me." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I thought she was repeating the same behavior from high school. It felt like she was once again rejecting me just as she had back then. I didn't know what else to do, so I respected her wishes. I left, just as I had in the past, and moved back in with my mother. My mother, who had been struggling with her health, seemed to be doing a bit better with my return. She appreciated the help, often telling me how grateful she was to have me around. But despite her own challenges, she was concerned about Natalie. "You may not be able to help her directly, but you need to be there for her," she insisted. "Even if Natalie doesn't want your help, you can't give up on her. I wasn't sure how to approach Natalie anymore, but my mother's words lingered in my mind. It was hard to see Natalie in so much pain and even harder to be shut out. But I knew my role wasn't just about what Natalie wanted. It was about what she needed, even if she couldn't admit it herself. I decided to preempt any further screaming by writing to Natalie. Letter Mrs. Parker, if you haven't noticed by now, I have complied with your wishes and moved out. I don't understand how my trying to help you was the cause of your anger. However, I will just do as you ask. I did not deserve to be berated by the screaming shrew you have become. I am very disappointed that you need to treat me like something nasty you stepped in and can't get off your shoes. That does not mean that I am abandoning you. You have abandoned us. I will do everything you allow me to do to make us better together. I understand that you are hurting, but I don't understand why I am being punished. I was not the one that caused your accident, and I was not angry with you. One thing you do need to understand, I will not wait forever. I also will not return unless and until you get some counseling and ask me to come back. If you choose not to get help, I will not move back to you. I am going to see if I can sign the house over to you, and if I can, I will buy something else. I know you are hurting. I am too. Your screaming and cursing at me only make my hurt worse. I wish you well, but the next steps are on you. I love you, but you have hurt me severely. Ethan, the result of the letter was not what I expected. I had hoped to jar Natalie into getting help. Instead, she quit the school system and mailed me an envelope with just the house keys and her wedding and engagement rings in it. When I went to check on the house, I found that she had moved out. There was no note, nothing except approximately a week's worth of clothes gone. Even her car was still there. I was devastated. I was lost. I was confused. Most of all, I was angry and I gave up. I moved my mom into the house with me. I also hired a cook/housekeeper and a nurse to check on Mom once a week. After 3 weeks, I got a call at work from Mrs. Hayes. She was wondering if Natalie had contacted me. When I told her I hadn't heard anything, she asked why Natalie had left. I explained everything that had happened up to that point. Then she dropped a bombshell. She revealed that she had received a letter supposedly from Natalie. The return address was from a mental health clinic located over 400 miles away. According to the letter, Natalie had specifically asked her mother not to visit and requested that she not tell me where she was. What made it even more unsettling was that the letter was typed, with no signature included. Mrs. Hayes gave me the clinic's name, address, and phone number. She ended the call by saying, "You need to go out there and knock some sense into that foolish girl." That began the next phase of the chaos in my life. I contacted my employer and removed Natalie from my health insurance, adding my mother instead. I then called the clinic and asked to speak to Natalie's doctor. They informed me that I was on an excluded list and could not get any information. Frustrated, I asked to be transferred to the business office. When I got through, I told them that neither I nor my insurance would be responsible for Natalie's medical costs. That did not make them happy. After some research, I found out why. The clinic was a non-accredited, for-profit facility run by a doctor using unapproved medications and procedures. The clinic had no legal way to compel payment from me, and Natalie had no assets for them to claim. Mrs. Hayes called me again a few days later, saying the clinic was now trying to bill her. I gave her my lawyer's name and assured her that if it came down to it, I would help her cover the costs. I explained to Mrs. Hayes that, because Natalie was over 21 and no longer living at home, there was likely no way the clinic could compel her to pay. I also shared my harsh plan to jar Natalie into coming home. After some tears, she reluctantly agreed, saying, "If it works, I'm all for it." I consulted with my trust attorney, who directed me to a local divorce attorney. During our meeting, I explained that I would pay the normal fees but didn't actually want a divorce. I just wanted to push Natalie into returning home. I also mentioned the clinic's shady practices and expressed concern they might interfere. The lawyer chuckled and said her brother was the district attorney for the clinic's jurisdiction and had already been looking into complaints about the facility. I drafted another letter to Natalie and had it mailed through the attorney's office alongside a divorce petition. Letter Mrs. Parker, I am beyond angry. You will soon, or may have already, received a divorce petition. I don't want it. I don't need it. But I am insisting on it if you are not back here in 10 days. Enclosed is an airline ticket. It is undated, but if not used in those 10 days, it will be revoked. I love you, but you have abandoned me. I am writing this letter in hopes you get your head out of your confusion and find a reputable doctor in our hometown, or at least within the state, to treat you. The divorce will be filed 10 days from the date of the signed receipt of the petition. If you get home before the 10 days are up, I will not file it. I love you, but I deserve someone who loves me, not someone who blames me for something I did not cause. Ethan P.S. The local district attorney is handling the paperwork at your end, so inform him if you plan to use the ticket. The actions by both the district attorney and my lawyer set off a chain reaction that uncovered a deeply disturbing situation. It was revealed that the clinic's doctor and staff had disappeared without a trace, leaving the patients locked in rooms without food or clothing. When the authorities found Natalie, she was in an unimaginably horrific state. Naked, bound to a bed, and lying in her own waste. Thankfully, she had only been left in that condition for a day or two, but she still suffered from severe dehydration and a serious rash from the unsanitary conditions. The authorities acted quickly, transporting all the patients to nearby hospitals and notifying their families. The clinic was exposed as a hub for holding patients considered burdensome by their families, often while exploiting the patient's finances. The revelation caused public outrage, and investigations into the clinic and its operators began immediately. As soon as I received word about Natalie, I flew out to see her. I found her in a far worse state than I had anticipated. The so-called doctor had kept her heavily sedated, allowing her to be awake only for meals. Natalie was unaware that I had tried to reach out to her and insisted she had never written to her mother. She explained that the clinic had restricted her communication with anyone outside. When I arrived, Natalie had been moved to a reputable hospital, where the medical team was working to slowly wean her off the sedatives. She was disoriented and mostly unaware of her surroundings. It took nearly a month before she fully recognized my presence and realized I was there for her. When Natalie became more aware of my visits, her emotions overwhelmed her, and she began to cry every time I showed up. Heartbroken, I approached the staff doctor and asked if my presence was causing her distress. The doctor assured me it wasn't and explained that her tears were a sign of her starting to process her trauma. He suggested that I stay nearby but limit my visits, allowing her space to work through her emotions. Following their advice, I visited Natalie every other day and stayed in a nearby hotel. After about a week, the strategy worked. Natalie began to insist that the hospital allow me to visit her more often. Once the restriction was lifted, the constant tears that had marked our reunions began to subside. As her condition improved, she was granted weekend leaves from the hospital. I took her to nearby towns, hoping the change of scenery would help her regain a sense of normalcy. Despite the time spent together, our emotional and physical intimacy was gone. Natalie flinched whenever I tried to place a comforting hand on her back or show any affection. While she was making progress, it was clear that she still had a long way to go before she could heal fully from the trauma she had endured. After a few months, my employer made it clear that I was expected to return to work. I decided to resign, explaining to Natalie that I would focus on starting my own business and that we would deal with my job situation once she was better. A week later, my former boss contacted me again, asking me to consider myself on an extended sabbatical instead of resigning outright. Frustrated by his wavering stance, I declined, telling him I didn't want to work for someone who didn't understand that family came first as Natalie's condition improved. We both began to hope for a better future, but the emotional distance between us persisted. Each time I tried to initiate deeper conversations or express affection, Natalie withdrew. It was clear that while her physical health was recovering, the mental and emotional scars from her time at the clinic were far from healed. One weekend, during one of her hospital leaves, Natalie confronted me. "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling, "I feel like I've destroyed everything between us. You're here and I know you're trying, but I can't seem to be the person you need me to be. Maybe you should stop waiting for me." Her words struck me deeply, but I refused to give up. "Natalie," I said, "I'm not waiting for you to be someone else. I just want you to heal. I want you to feel safe and loved again. That's all." Despite my reassurance, Natalie's guilt and self-doubt continued to plague her. The hospital staff encouraged her to join a trauma support group, which she reluctantly agreed to try. Slowly, through counseling and group therapy, she began opening up about her experiences at the clinic and the feelings of guilt and helplessness that had consumed her. Meanwhile, I decided to take steps to rebuild our lives. I started the process of establishing a financial consulting firm, working from home while Natalie continued her therapy. I hoped that creating a stable and supportive environment would help her heal. One evening, after returning from a therapy session, Natalie broke down. "Ethan," she said, tears streaming down her face, "I've been so scared that I've ruined everything, that I'm not the person you fell in love with anymore, but I'm starting to realize that maybe I can't be her again. And maybe that's okay." I took her hands in mine and looked into her tear-filled eyes. "You don't have to be the same person," I said. "I love you for who you are, Natalie. For the strength it's taken to get through this. For the courage to keep fighting. That's all I've ever needed." From that point on, our relationship began to mend. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments of tension and uncertainty, but we were finally moving forward together. Natalie eventually decided to return to teaching, though at a different school. She found solace and purpose in working with students, and her confidence slowly returned as Natalie settled into her new teaching job. I continued growing my consulting firm. The routine brought us a sense of stability we hadn't felt in years. While the trauma of what we had endured still lingered, we found ways to support each other. Counseling became a regular part of our lives, both as a couple and individually, and it helped us navigate the lingering emotional challenges. We decided to take things one step at a time, focusing on rebuilding trust and rediscovering the connection we once had. On weekends, we began engaging in small activities we used to enjoy together. Hiking, visiting local coffee shops, or simply watching movies at home. Those small moments became the foundation of our healing. 2 years after Natalie's ordeal at the clinic, we received news that marked a turning point. The authorities investigating the clinic had uncovered a web of illegal activities, including financial exploitation, abuse, and medical malpractice. Families of the victims were offered the chance to participate in a class action lawsuit against the clinic's operators. Natalie, after much deliberation, chose to be part of the lawsuit. She shared her story in a deposition, determined to hold the perpetrators accountable. The process was emotionally taxing, but it also proved cathartic for her. The lawsuit resulted in a significant settlement, and while no amount of money could undo the harm, it provided a sense of justice for the victims. With the settlement, Natalie and I decided to establish a foundation in her name, focusing on supporting mental health resources and raising awareness about the dangers of unregulated facilities. The foundation became a shared project that strengthened our bond. It also gave Natalie a renewed sense of purpose, as she worked to ensure that others would not endure the horrors she had faced. As the years passed, we continued to grow together. We celebrated small victories, our first vacation since everything happened, Natalie's promotion to department head at her school, and the expansion of my consulting firm. Each milestone reminded us of how far we had come. One evening, as we sat on the porch of our home, watching the sunset, Natalie reached for my hand. "Ethan," she said softly, "I know we've been through so much, but I'm so grateful you never gave up on me. I don't know where I'd be without you." I squeezed her hand and smiled. "We made it through together," I replied, "and I wouldn't trade a single moment of it, because it brought us to this." As time went on, Natalie and I found ourselves embracing the life we had rebuilt. Though the past had left its mark, it also brought us closer in ways we hadn't anticipated. We learned to cherish the simple joys of life: quiet mornings with coffee, hosting dinners for friends and family, and making plans for the future without fear of what might come next. The foundation we had established became a significant part of our lives. Natalie took an active role in its operations, organizing workshops and speaking at events to raise awareness about mental health and the importance of proper regulation for care facilities. Her passion for advocacy inspired countless others, and the foundation began to grow, attracting partnerships and funding from organizations aligned with its mission. For me, my consulting firm flourished as well. I focused on building a supportive work environment, prioritizing employee well-being, and fostering a culture that valued balance between work and family. My experiences with Natalie and the struggles we had faced shaped my approach, and it resonated with clients and colleagues alike. Despite our progress, there were still moments when the weight of our past resurfaced. Natalie occasionally experienced flashbacks, particularly during stressful times, but with therapy and our unwavering support for each other, she learned to navigate those moments. Similarly, I sometimes struggled with the lingering guilt of feeling I hadn't done enough to protect her, but Natalie always reassured me. "You've always been my rock," she would say. "You didn't just stand by me, you fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. That's more than enough." A few years later, we decided to revisit the idea of starting a family. While we knew there were risks, we were both in a much better place emotionally and physically. With the guidance of a compassionate and experienced doctor, we began exploring our options. After several months of trying, Natalie became pregnant. The pregnancy was a mix of excitement and anxiety. Every milestone was a cause for celebration, but there were also moments of fear. We leaned on each other and our support network, determined to stay hopeful. Finally, on a crisp autumn morning, Natalie gave birth to a healthy baby boy. We named him Gabriel, a name that symbolized strength and resilience. Holding Gabriel in my arms for the first time, I was overwhelmed by a sense of gratitude. The struggles we had endured and the love that had carried us through had led us to this moment. As Natalie looked on, her smile radiant, I whispered, "We made it, Nat. He's our miracle." From that day forward, our lives were forever changed. Parenthood brought its own challenges, but it also brought a new kind of joy that made every hardship we had faced worthwhile. Together, we continued to grow, united by the love that had weathered every storm. Raising Gabriel became the centerpiece of our lives. Every milestone he reached felt like a victory, not just for him but for us as a family. From his first smile to his first steps, we marveled at the joy he brought into our lives. Natalie's teaching experience made her a natural at nurturing Gabriel's curiosity, while I relished every moment of bonding with him, from bedtime stories to kicking a soccer ball around the yard. Our home, once a quiet sanctuary for healing, transformed into a vibrant space filled with laughter, toys scattered across the floor, and the occasional chaos of toddlerhood. It wasn't always easy. Sleepless nights and teething pains tested our patience, but we approached every challenge together, drawing strength from the partnership we had built over the years. The foundation we established continued to thrive, expanding its outreach and impact. Natalie became a respected voice in the mental health advocacy community, often invited to speak at conferences and collaborate with policymakers. The stories she shared about her own experiences resonated deeply, inspiring change and fostering understanding. Meanwhile, my consulting firm reached new heights, allowing me to scale back my hours and spend more time at home. This balance gave me the chance to be present for Gabriel's early years, something I cherish deeply. Watching Natalie interact with him, teaching him numbers, reading him stories, and cheering him on during his first attempts at sports, filled me with pride and gratitude. As Gabriel grew, he began to ask questions about the photographs in our home. He pointed to a picture of Natalie and me at one of the Foundation's events and asked, "Why do you look so serious, Mama?" Natalie knelt beside him, her voice steady but tender. "Because I was talking about something very important, sweetheart. I was telling people how we can help others who are feeling scared or hurt, so they don't have to be alone." Gabriel nodded thoughtfully, then hugged her tightly. "You're really good at helping people, Mama," he said, his innocence melting our hearts. Years later, as Gabriel prepared to start school, Natalie and I reflected on how far we had come. The struggles that had once defined our lives were no longer burdens but stepping stones that had shaped us into the people and the family we had become. One evening, after Gabriel had gone to bed, Natalie and I sat on the porch, gazing at the stars. "Ethan," she said softly, "when I think about everything we've been through, I can't believe we're here. It feels like a dream sometimes." I took her hand in mine and smiled. "We earned this, Nat. Every tear, every fight, every step forward. It brought us here, and I wouldn't trade it for anything." As we sat together, the cool night air around us, I realized that while our journey had been far from easy, it was one I wouldn't change. It was a story of resilience, love, and the power of never giving up on each other. Our family was proof that no matter how dark the road might seem, there is always light to be found when you walk it together. As Gabriel grew older, our lives continued to evolve in ways we never imagined. His boundless energy and curiosity kept us on our toes, and every new phase of his life brought fresh adventures. By the time he turned 6, he had developed a fascination with space, often asking questions about stars and planets. This newfound interest inspired us to take a family trip to a science museum, where Gabriel's excitement was contagious. "Look, Mama, look," he exclaimed, pointing to a model of a space shuttle. "I want to go to the stars one day." Natalie crouched down beside him, smiling. "You can do anything you set your mind to, sweetheart. Just remember, the most important thing is to never give up." Her words resonated deeply with me, a reminder of the resilience that had defined our journey together. As I watched Natalie guide Gabriel through the exhibits, I marveled at how far she had come. The woman who once doubted her strength now exuded confidence and warmth, not just as a mother, but as a mentor and advocate for others. Meanwhile, the foundation we had built continued to flourish, expanding its reach and impact. We opened new chapters in neighboring cities, offering support groups, workshops, and scholarships for aspiring mental health professionals. Natalie's story became a cornerstone of the Foundation's mission, inspiring countless individuals to seek help and find hope. At my consulting firm, I began mentoring younger professionals, sharing not just financial strategies but life lessons I had learned through our experiences. Success isn't just about numbers, I often told them. It's about building something meaningful, something that leaves the world better than you found it. Our lives were busy but fulfilling, filled with moments that reminded us of the importance of family, love, and community. On weekends, we made it a tradition to spend time together, whether it was exploring hiking trails, baking cookies at home, or simply cuddling on the couch with a movie. One summer evening, as we sat around a bonfire in our backyard, Gabriel turned to us with a thoughtful expression. "Mama, Papa," he began, "I think I want to help people too, like you and Mama do." Natalie's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out to stroke his hair. "That's a wonderful dream, Gabriel," she said softly. "Helping others is the greatest gift you can give." As the years went on, Gabriel's determination and compassion only grew. By the time he entered high school, he had become an active volunteer at the Foundation, often assisting with events and connecting with younger children who looked up to him. Natalie and I couldn't have been prouder. Our journey, once marked by so much pain and uncertainty, had led us to a life filled with purpose and joy. Together, we had built not just a family, but a legacy of resilience and love that would continue to inspire generations to come. Even as life continued to bring its challenges, we faced them with the same strength and unity that had carried us through before. And as we looked to the future, we knew that whatever came our way, we would face it together, stronger than ever. As Gabriel prepared for college, Natalie and I found ourselves reflecting on the passage of time. It felt like just yesterday we had brought him home as a newborn, unsure of how we would navigate parenthood. Now, he stood before us as a confident, compassionate young man with dreams of making a difference in the world. Gabriel had chosen to pursue a degree in astrophysics, combining his lifelong fascination with space and his drive to contribute to society. He was accepted into a prestigious university on a full scholarship, and while we were incredibly proud, the thought of him leaving home brought bittersweet emotions. On the morning we dropped him off at campus, Natalie and I helped him settle into his dorm room. As we hugged him goodbye, Gabriel smiled and said, "I'll make you proud, I promise." "You already have, sweetheart," Natalie replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Just be yourself. That's all we could ever want." Driving home that evening, the house felt quieter than ever. Natalie reached over and took my hand, a mix of sadness and gratitude in her expression. "He's going to do amazing things, Ethan. I just know it." I nodded, squeezing her hand. "He will, and he'll always know where home is." With Gabriel off at college, Natalie and I entered a new chapter of our lives. The empty nest gave us an opportunity to reconnect as a couple, rediscovering hobbies and activities we had put aside while raising him. We began traveling more, visiting places we had always dreamed of seeing, from the cobblestone streets of Prague to the serene landscapes of New Zealand. Through it all, Natalie continued her work with the Foundation, expanding its influence and finding new ways to support individuals and families in need. I became more involved as well, offering financial expertise to help the organization grow sustainably. Together, we found fulfillment not only in our shared mission, but in the deep bond that had carried us through so many challenges. Occasionally, Gabriel would call to share updates about his studies or seek advice. Each call reminded us of the strong foundation we had built as a family, one rooted in love, resilience, and mutual support. When he came home for holidays, the house would come alive again, filled with laughter and the smell of his favorite meals. One evening, as Natalie and I sat by the fireplace, she looked at me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" she asked. "All the time," I said, pulling her closer. "Every moment, every challenge. It all brought us here, and I wouldn't change a thing." She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "Neither would I. We're lucky, Ethan. lucky to have found our way back to each other. As the fire crackled softly, I realized how true her words were. Despite the hardships we had faced, we had built a life filled with meaning, love, and a legacy that would continue to grow. And as the years stretched ahead, we knew one thing for certain together: there was nothing we couldn't overcome. The years continued to pass, bringing new milestones and experiences. Gabriel excelled in his studies, earning accolades for his research in astrophysics. By the time he graduated, he had already secured a position at a renowned space research institute, fulfilling his dream of working toward humanity's exploration of the stars. When Gabriel shared the news with us, Natalie and I couldn't contain our pride. "You've worked so hard for this," I told him. "And no matter where this journey takes you, just remember, you've got us cheering you on every step of the way." After his graduation ceremony, we hosted a small celebration at home, inviting close friends and family. Watching Gabriel interact with the people who had supported him along the way, I was reminded of how much he had inherited Natalie's warmth and compassion. As Gabriel moved forward with his career, Natalie and I embraced our roles as mentors within the foundation. Over the years, the organization had grown significantly, expanding its programs to include not only mental health support but also educational initiatives, community outreach, and scholarships for underprivileged students. One of our proudest moments came when we launched a new initiative named after Gabriel, aimed at encouraging young minds to explore STEM fields while promoting emotional resilience. The program quickly gained traction, with schools across the country incorporating it into their curriculums. In our personal lives, Natalie and I continued to explore the world together. Our travels took us to ancient ruins, bustling cities, and serene landscapes, each destination deepening our appreciation for life's beauty. We often joked that retirement couldn't slow us down, even though we had begun to prioritize quiet evenings and the comfort of home. As we approached our golden years, Gabriel surprised us with a life-changing announcement. Over dinner during one of his visits home, he revealed, "I've been seeing someone, her name is Elena. She's a biologist working in environmental research, and I think she's the one." Natalie's face lit up with joy. "Oh, Gabriel, that's wonderful. When do we get to meet her?" "Soon," he said, smiling. "I wanted to tell you first because, well, I'm planning to propose." Hearing this, a wave of emotion washed over me. The little boy we had raised was now stepping into a new chapter of his life, one filled with love and possibility. "We're so happy for you, Gabe," I said, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. True to his word, Gabriel introduced Elena to us a few weeks later, and it didn't take long for her to feel like part of the family. She shared Gabriel's passion for making a difference in the world, and the two of them complemented each other beautifully. The day of Gabriel and Elena's wedding was one of the happiest moments of our lives. Held in a sunlit garden surrounded by friends and family, the ceremony was a celebration of love, resilience, and new beginnings. As I walked Natalie to our seats, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "We've done well, haven't we?" I nodded, unable to suppress a smile. Better than I could have ever hoped. As we watched Gabriel and Elena exchange vows, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought us to this moment. The struggles, the triumphs, the love that had carried us through it all. It had shaped not just our lives, but the lives of those we loved most. And as the sun set on that perfect day, I knew our story wasn't ending. It was continuing, in the lives and dreams of the next generation and the years that followed Gabriel's wedding. Our family grew in ways we had only dreamed of. Gabriel and Elena welcomed twins, a boy named Lucas and a girl named Clara, bringing immeasurable joy to our lives. Becoming grandparents was a transformative experience. Natalie and I embraced our new roles with open hearts, spoiling the twins with love, stories, and an endless supply of cookies. Our home, once again alive with the laughter and energy of children, became a place of warmth and connection. Watching Natalie read to Lucas and Clara, teaching them the same lessons she had taught Gabriel, filled me with a profound sense of gratitude. These moments were the culmination of all we had fought for, a legacy of love and resilience. As the years passed, Natalie and I decided to scale back our involvement in the foundation, handing leadership to a new generation inspired by its mission. We remained honorary advisors, occasionally attending events and offering guidance, but most of our days were spent enjoying the simple pleasures of life, tending to our garden, playing with our grandchildren, and reflecting on the incredible journey we had shared. One crisp autumn evening, As we sat on the porch wrapped in a shared blanket, Natalie rested her head on my shoulder. The twilight painted the horizon in hues of orange and gold, and the air carried the faint scent of fallen leaves. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice full of contentment, "I couldn't have imagined a more beautiful life. After everything, we've found our peace." I smiled, kissing her forehead gently. "We've lived a story worth telling, Nat. And the best part? It's still being written in the lives of those we love." Natalie and I grew old together, savoring every moment we were given. Even as the years slowed us down, the love we had built over decades remained as vibrant as ever. When the time came to say goodbye, I held her hand and whispered, "Thank you for walking this life with me." She smiled, her eyes full of the same love that had carried us through every trial and triumph. After Natalie's passing, I found solace in the family we had nurtured and the memories we had created. Gabriel, Elena, Lucas, and Clara became my world, their love a constant reminder of everything Natalie and I had built together. In my final years, I often sat on that same porch, watching the sunset and imagining Natalie beside me. I found peace in knowing that our story had come full circle, a testament to resilience, love, and the enduring power of hope. And when my time came, I left this world with a heart full of gratitude, knowing that our story would live on through those we loved. It was a life well lived, a journey worth every step, and a love that would echo for generations to come.